In the year 1997, the future is in chaos and turmoil. Mankind is on the brink of extinction. Brave survivors band together and build a time displacement apparatus to receive a signal from a parallel future. This transmission is the Vundacast.
There's one team that kicks ass. They're assembled. They're the Vundacast. Never back down from the brass. Always start first. Never finish last. Had a max speed. Bit too fast. Oh no, they're out of gas. It's okay there. Just a podcast. They're the greatest. We're the Vundacast.
Welcome to the Vundacast, the official podcast of Vundablog.com, the home of people that are anti-caterpillars that eat Scotch bonnet plants.
Yeah.
Extremely specific.
It is totally Halloween relevant because it is a gardener's horror story. Imagine you literally one day, you look outside, you see your beautiful pepper plants bursting to the seams with peppers, full of leaves, happy. Then, all of a sudden, a day later, you get
The mutilated corpses.
a day later, someone comes to you and goes, "What happened to your plants?" And you're like, "What?" And you go outside, and 90% of the leaves have been stripped by these giant 4-inch thick boy monstrosities
Holy fuck.
as hornworms. They poop all over everything, and they're gross. And their poops aren't small. It's big old caterpillars. Too busy eating the crap out of your plants.
You know what else I heard they
It's
do?
nightmarish.
I heard they vote for MAGA 2020.
I think they do. Hornworms vote for Trump for sure. Their tails are red, so I'm just gonna tell you that.
We'll
Their
have to
tails.
really get started keeping this to an hour.
Anyway, that's my horror movie of the week. Five Nights.
And I'm your host, Steven.
Yeah.
That was Danielle. And with us, as always, our glorious non-binary champion, D-Rock.
Yeah, D-Rock in the house. I watched a lot of movies this week, so I'm ready to roll.
Where do you wanna? What movie stood out the most to you?
We didn't even finish last week.
We didn't get to all the movies we did last week. That's why we're gonna have like special honorable mentions.
We
in
have
the
to do
future.
honorable mentions because there's just too many to list.
We gotta have like lightning rounds where we're like, okay, so I watched this movie, it was alright. Yeah, there was this thing. This movie, like rapid fire. Because there's a few that I like actually want to say stuff about, but there's a lot that I can kind of just be like, this was good, I like this, blah blah blah. I started the week with a lot of movies I've already seen before, so I guess I can kind of like blaze through those a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of movies that I've already watched too. I did a lot of nostalgia watching.
Yeah, because I feel like I haven't been doing enough of that because I'm trying to like watch a lot of new movies. But for Witch Day, I, of course, went with the Robert Eggers modern classic, The Witch, which is always a lot of fun.
Or the Vivid, as really pretentious, dumb people like to say.
Yeah.
Vivitch? Or they like
They just get a really like huge boner off typing
it, but they
with
don't.
2 V's.
But they
But
don't
that's
pronounce
basically-
it Vivitch.
But
That's how
I
it was.
pronounce it
It's the
Vivitch
same
because
thing.
I'm a dummy.
Well, that's how W was. I mean, W was just like 2 V's back in the like. That's kind of how it was written back then. I
But to
think.
know that if I went in a time machine to back then, I would literally read all documents with, and then they've visited. Vivitch.
Who's visiting places? You're crazy.
I don't know. I'm just gonna assume that all W's are double V's and just pronounce them.
Yeah. I mean,
The Witch, I think it holds up better than
farther
than the Lighthouse.
The Lighthouse.
Really?
I'm not saying like just for
I just don't
rewatching
think that
purposes.
you
I
like-
think
For rewatching, yeah, that
I don't
makes
think
sense.
I like The Lighthouse as much as other people did. So
I
think
just
that's just
think-
preference.
I
It's,
think
it's
I
pretty
think
dry
time
for
will say I'm
Steven.
right. Time will say I'm right.
It's a pretty dry movie for Steven.
I mean, it has farting, so
Well, that's true. Yeah, there's that. But yeah, I mean, The Witch definitely has more like fun stuff in it. I feel like, and it's I was just thinking about like, it's kind of interesting how like there's Robert Eggers, and I feel like he and like Jordan Peele are kind of in the same like sweet spot where they've only really done like two big things, but they both kind of knocked it out of the park, at least like critically, and like, you know, people have liked them. And so they're kind of in this place of like, I kind of feel like the sky's the limit for both of them, that like we could be talking about them as like legends in like 20, 30, 40 years time, depending on what they do going forward. I'm really excited for Robert Eggers is working on that Viking revenge saga set in Iceland at the turn of the 10th century.
That
I'm
better
really-
have Mads Mikkelsen in it. If it doesn't, it's not a Viking movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm serious. If you don't put Mads Mikkelsen in your Viking revenge movie, you don't even have a Viking revenge movie. The fuck in, sir. I have one. I love The Witch, and I just have one anecdote about it, is the fact that I discovered that the guy who played Satan at the end, like Black Phillip personified, his name is Daniel Malik, and he totally like followed me. Like I followed him, and because he found me on Twitter, because one time we found out who the actor was, and we're like, this is the guy who played Satan in The Witch. God damn, he's hot. And he like commented like, and I was like, oh shit, he's watching for his own thirst tweets. Dear God. Tag him. I just typed his name, and he like obviously like, you know, these actors who are kind of like trying to.
Let me see what people are saying about me today.
Exactly, they're totally searching Twitter, and he found our thirst tweet. So ever since then, I followed him, and he's hot, and he's awesome.
Nice.
So just letting you know that the guy who played Satan is very sexy, which totally.
He should be, right? Like Satan should be sexy.
It matches up to my vision of who he was in the movie anyway. A hot guy saying, "What's thou like to taste butter?" I'm like, yes, I sure will.
Yeah, I'll taste your butter, baby.
Butter with you?
The one thing that I always think of about The Witch is, you know, that there's that like disclaimer at the very end of the movie of like, this is based on actual accounts of things that people thought they saw back then. I wish that disclaimer was like at the top of I know it's like the decision to put it at the end was probably very much deliberate, but I wish you could like go in knowing this is what people actually thought they saw back in those days. And like that gives such a different context to that movie, and it makes it like social commentary almost. Just the fact that like this is what people thought.
Yeah.
You know what I wonder? Because in The Lighthouse, he was so ambitious about like his visual style being period. I wonder if at any point while he was making, if The Witch was his second movie, would he have pushed would he have made it in black and white? Would he have, you know, made different aesthetic decisions?
I think that color-wise, it's so drab that he didn't need black and white, because it's got a very sort of old movie feel.
Yeah.
It's almost black and white as it is. Like it's so muted and so dull.
But then you see on The Lighthouse, he has such confidence. He just goes all the way with it.
But he doesn't want. But The Lighthouse has a very specific look, because he was going for a very specific tone with it. And the same thing goes for The Witch. He doesn't want it to feel so far removed from the audience that like imagine, okay, remember when we saw it with that audience of like old men and angry parents who were like, what is this nonsense? Because they were expecting some sort of like slasher scary witch movie. And the thing is, if that was in black and white, they would have already walked out.
Yeah, I know.
They were already so mad at the movie because they were like, what is this? This is so boring.
Yeah.
And it would have been worse if it was in black and white. So I think
I'm not saying it would have been better or worse. I'm saying that as a filmmaker, he could get away with that on a second film, where maybe on his first film,
maybe
people might give him the leeway.
He better not make every other movie black and white. I'm gonna get mad. Look, there's color for a reason. All right, we work hard to get that for a reason.
I mean, like, think about what he's doing next. You can't do Viking revenge in black and you need blood and fucking like color in that shit. Like,
that's messed up. I don't have any Viking revenge films on my list, unfortunately.
yeah, I need to get into that genre.
We had
it exists. Mads Mikkelsen did some. See?
Yeah.
We had our 21st day was all black and white movies.
Oh, nice.
And we watched the classic The Wolfman. We watched 1931's Frankenstein with Boris Karloff. And then Dani wanted to watch 1940's Rebecca, which just got remade on Netflix. So we watched Rebecca, which isn't
from Alfred Hitchcock.
Hitchcock's Rebecca, which isn't like a very like ideally Halloween
it's a psychological
movie.
thriller.
It's a psychological thriller, but it still has like a very even though it's not a ghost story, it has sort of like a ghostly story type style. So I would recommend people watch it before watching the remake.
Don't watch the remake. Just watch the really fun Alfred Hitchcock.
I heard people are thirsting over Armie Hammer in this remake.
Well, of course
I'm not gonna tell people
are.
thirst.
I'm just saying that it's so unnecessary. It's just not a necessary thing to remake. Who's clamoring in the audience or in life? Who's like, you know what I want? More Daphne du Maurier adaptations of Rebecca. Like, what the hell? It's such a random decision.
The Netflix algorithm can't be wrong.
I'm sure.
Well, and
they were probably like lesbian maids, weird, mysterious, missing wives, period piece. They're gonna love it, but it's still like.
I mean, it's an uphill battle anyway. Anytime you're gonna try to remake a fucking Alfred Hitchcock movie, like, what more daunting task for a filmmaker could there possibly be than like, here, try to do something with the the work of Alfred Hitchcock. Like,
it's also it's so deliciously campy, the original 1940s, that it's like, you can't. There's no way to distinguish. Like, it's already gone as far as it can go because it was made by a bunch of former like silent movie actors who are doing everything they can. Like, they're old woman.
They're theater actors. They project. They learn to project, and that's all they know.
So Rebecca's like an assistant to this rich old woman, just because like back in the day you would just be hired to be a companion.
No, she wasn't Rebecca. Rebecca was the dead girl.
I'm sorry, Rebecca was the dead girl.
main character.
The main character. What's her name? I can't remember her name. You say I don't even remember her name. Whatever, that girl. She was the companion to this woman who just hired her to be around her to keep her company.
While she's on vacation.
Yeah, while she's on vacation. And it was so funny because this woman was like, "Ooh, do invite Lord blah, blah, blah." Like, she literally talked like that was her character. It was fantastic. And then Mrs. Danvers was so gay and I loved it. She was totally in love with Rebecca. Like,
Nice.
it was a very, it's such a queer love story in like a weird tragic way, and it's just
nice.
It was just so funny. And then Laurence Olivier, I don't know if I've ever seen any other Laurence Olivier film. I think this might be the first Laurence Olivier film I've ever watched that I can remember. And he was funny too. They were all unintentionally funny to me because I'm not from 1940, so I'm watching this and I'm like, why is everyone behaving like they're all drunk? Like, just But
I
it's
kind of feel that way about old movies most of the time. Like, who the fuck talks like this? This is so not my reality, but
Yeah.
like, I'm sure that like that was kind of a thing at one point, but like, did they really actually talk like that? Like,
No, actually, it's nobody. No, that's the thing. People didn't really talk like that in real life. It was more because it was staged conversation.
Yeah.
So they had to learn, literally, they had to learn, apart from the visual language of film, they had to learn the language of film. Like, you don't need to talk like this to get a
Right.
You don't need to do that because you're not on a stage. People can be right there next to you on a screen. So it was a learning process in the early days of sound talkies, you know. So
Well, even and like those older talking pictures were, you know, like, I mean, the sound wasn't as good as it is now either. So like to some extent, you kind of did have to project, not as much as like they thought you needed to, but like you did kind of have to project. Like you couldn't do the kind of subtle, like low talking, like normal conversation that you hear in like modern movies because you just didn't have sound like that at the time.
But it's also just because they were theater
But
actors.
also, yeah,
They
exactly.
didn't know any better.
Right.
Lawrence Olivier. He's like, you think
They're projecting to the back seat.
her.
Projecting to the back row. They're speaking to the back row, and it's like there's no back row.
A lot of fun watching that. I'm glad I watched that instead of watching the remake first. So
Nice.
yeah.
And then we got kind of burned out on black and white movies.
Yeah, we're like, we're done now.
And then we've seen enough black and white. Let's go some color. And then we were hearing some positive buzz about on Shudder. They have a movie called The Cleansing Hour.
Oh yeah, you said that was
a very awesome, fun watch. It's a movie. It's a possession movie, sort of. And it's about like a fake possession TV web series that someone has going on that all of a sudden becomes real. Which like in a lesser filmmaker's hands would just be, you know, just really schlocky and silly, but this is really well executed and they had a good budget. And it's one of the few times where you see effects that are CGI and it's like, wow, that works, and it's creepy.
Yeah.
And it's gory, and it hits all the right check marks.
I was very impressed at the movie and how well they executed the premise. And I was also like, what's funny was I had been complaining to Steven about how modern horror is so scared of the cell phone and the internet, except to like Google search things. Right. Because they're just like, what are we going to do? Because this thing is like, they're just going to call for help. They're just going to be able to call for help. But this managed to take modern technology and use it in such an effective and scary way. Like it became part of the problem and also part of the solution. It was very well executed. I don't want to give a lot away because I think that it's a movie that deserves to be kind of watched fresh. But yeah, and all the actors were very committed. They performed well. I was very impressed with this movie. I think that the people who wrote it and directed it have promising.
Everybody go check out The Cleansing Hour.
On Shudder.
Is that a Shudder exclusive?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Yeah, I actually watched a couple of Shudder exclusives also on I think it was there was one day where I was like I think it was Werewolves Day, and I was like I have no interest in any movies about werewolves. So I was like, fuck it. It was Wednesday. I did a Woman Crush Wednesday and watched a bunch of movies directed by women. And a couple of them were, I think they are Shudder exclusives. I'm not sure. One is called Tigers Are Not Afraid. It's this Mexican movie. It's kind of like more of a dark fantasy, I think. Like there's like elements of horror, but it's more on like a dark fantasy side. But it's a really powerful, beautiful, like really sad movie about these kids that are caught up in the drug war, and and then some, I don't want to give too much away, some stuff starts to happen. And
Spanish language horror is always so sad.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Yeah.
Whether it's from Latin America or from Spain, it's always like the most depressing thing
Right.
at the end. Like I'm just thinking about the Orphanage, which is like seriously the gut punch at the end of the Orphanage.
Well, the whole La Llorona myth is like the saddest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life too. Like,
it is. But but like I don't know if you've ever seen the Orphanage. It's another Spanish directed film, and it is Spanish language horror film. And I'm serious, like the gut punch of the end. Like you're thinking, oh, it's gonna be so horrific, and then you're just like, oh no, oh no, oh no. Yeah, that's a great movie, but it's a sad one. That's a sad one.
It is, yeah.
What other Shudder exclusive?
I also watched a movie from Laos called Dearest Sister.
Whoa.
That was about like this lady living in Laos, and I think I was a little fuzzy on the details, but I think she got like invited to come and like work for her cousin who's blind. I think she's living in the US, and like she lives with this guy who I think is French. Something like, yeah, I don't know. It's a little confusing. But she works with, she like helps her around the house and stuff, and the blind lady keeps having these kind of like seizure vision things, and yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but it's like she has these visions, and the woman like takes advantage of her visions for like monetary gain. And she's poor, so she's like trying to get the money sent back to her. So it's like there's like really it explores kind of like issues of inequality and greed and like betrayal, and it has a really awesome ending too. And yeah, it was just really incredibly haunting and disturbing and like uncomfortable in a lot of different ways, like uncomfortable in, ghostly ways, but also in like the lengths that people will go to when poverty drives them to do things, and then greed consumes them. And it's a very, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I don't know if this is like I only have 2 movie sample of this idea, but like these movies coming sort of out of like East Asia that are very concerned, like Parasite, with like inequality and like showing the depths that poverty can drive people to, is really interesting. So I like that one a lot too.
What was it called again?
It's called Dearest Sister.
Dearest Sister.
It's on Shudder.
We watched for Genre Bender Day, we watched a female directed horror movie. Well, I mean, yeah, directed horror western, I guess. Catherine Bigelow. Was this her first movie she ever
directed? This was her first directorial effort.
We watched Near Dark, which is basically a very strange vampire movie.
Vampire western or something like that, right?
Vampire western.
They apparently originally wanted to make a western, and nobody would finance a western in the 80s.
Yeah.
So they made it modern, but they still used like the western elements that they wanted. And there's probably a moment in the movie where like they have their main character on horseback at night, riding a horse with his hat, and you're like, that's the movie that they wanted to make.
Midnight Cowboy, baby. But yeah, it's very dreamy. It's a very dreamy movie. Kind of, a little bit like the pacing's a little bit uneven, but it's a very good like freshman effort, I think, like a freshman project. And
there's a lot of awesome like fire stunts.
Yeah.
Yes. For the movie. The movie's very obsessed with like the vampire part of the mythology that like you're gonna burst into flames in sunlight.
Yeah.
So they really go hard on that element. And then I didn't even realize it was directed by a woman for years, because for me this was always like a movie just to see Bill Paxton ham it up as a vampire.
Yeah.
And that is, for me, the funnest element of this movie is Bill Paxton just
Mhm.
chewing the scenery and like knowing that he has like
half the,
such power over everybody
and
over
half
him.
the cast of Aliens is basically in this movie as vampires. So it's a good time. I actually think watching this movie, I mean, I haven't confirmed this, but I feel like there's definitely something that influenced Joss Whedon in terms of Buffy, because, or at least the writers and creators of Buffy, not just Joss, but the whole writing team. Because there's in the story, they drive during the day and they spray paint and block out the windows, and that's what Spike and Angel do when they're traveling. They travel during the day, and they also have that thing where they kind of like catch on fire, but it's a late, you know, depends on how much body is exposed to the sun and how much isn't exposed to the sun. And also Bill Paxton wearing a leather jacket and being kind of a loose cannon. I feel like there's a spiky influence to him as well. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think the writers of Buffy definitely got some elements of Near Dark inspiration for their storytelling.
Interesting.
And then our power went out and we were lost and adrift in the world and had to rewatch Van Helsing and Jennifer's Body on DVD.
Which is so underrated. Jennifer's Body is such an underrated movie, and it's really infuriating.
I mean, it's kind of like there was this article, I never got around to actually reading it, but there was an article that I saw that the title was something along the lines of Jennifer's Body's cult feminist status is kind of too little too late, because it came out like over 10 years ago, and like none of this, I mean, this is a very recent phenomenon. I watched that movie like earlier in the pandemic and was also very impressed with it, and like kind of knew I would be, because I had been hearing all of this stuff that people have been saying about this kind of being a very feminist movie.
I think that there was a lot that was a lot going against that movie in 2009, which is amazing to think. But I mean, Megan Fox was having the worst time of her life at that moment, because she had talked about like Michael Bay and his sexism on set, and they destroyed her career essentially.
Yeah.
And all of his crew members made her feel like garbage, and they replaced her. Also, I'm sorry, just this movie, when the critics reviewed it, I remember this too, they were so like critical of the movie. They were like, oh, all of this like lesbian, all this queer lesbian stuff, it's just so titillating, and it's just for titillation, and it's just for, like, it is not. It is absolutely a queer story. It is a romantic story. Like, Needy and Jennifer are in love and like they have a romantic relationship as well as a friend relationship.
Right.
There is a love triangle going on between Needy, Chip, and Jen. Like, it's just completely clear. And and it also like and it blends also into that, the idea of toxic friendships and a lot of things that are going on in that relationship. But yeah, like, it's just, I also think just in 2009, there was no way that critics could process a movie like that without thinking it was just for men's pleasure, that it was for male gaze, which when you're watching it, it's not in the male gaze at all. It's not. Like, it's a very sensual scene, the kissing scene, but I think the only reason they even thought that it was for the male gaze is because all these guys found Megan Fox so hot they couldn't concentrate. So, like, her doing anything, her reading a phone book, her walking down the street, they were like, she's trying to entice us. It's like, no, she's living her life. Like, you know, you guys are the fucking worst.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really do. I just think that it was just too gay, too feminist, and too in a terrible part of Megan Fox's career to be taken seriously like it should have. Because I think that if it had come out now, they would be like, oh my God. They would be like, blah! They would be like loving that shit. They would love that movie right now if it had come out now.
And it does, it has a tone throughout the movie that, like, most movies don't get away with being this fun anymore and being a horror movie. like people stabbing someone while singing 867-5309.
Yeah.
Like that's an inherently comedic thing to do that they play in both a horrific and comedic way, like just expertly.
I think that was another thing too, is the critics really didn't get that this movie was doing stuff like that on purpose.
Yeah.
They thought it was just poor filmmaking because they're pretentious assholes. But no, it's just a movie that's fun and poking fun at itself and playing around with like the genre conventions and just not afraid to not take itself too seriously.
Yeah, and definitely the sexism as well, the fact that it is a female writer and a female director, which even to this day, the amount of female directed horror movies is one thing. You can still have trouble finding it, but female written ones, oh my good, you don't understand how many horror movies will watch new ones, and I just see like the Doodly brothers, the Stabby brothers, the two guys, and the writing bros, and the guy named Jew, and like the Judas, and like, you know, like,
hey, the guy named Jew follows us.
No, the guy named Judas. I'm sorry. I was trying to find like a gothic weird name that's because what was it the other day? Some guy named himself Johnny Kevorkian, and
Johnny Kevorkian.
Like that name. So I'm serious. So like all these like modern day horrors are still so male driven. That genre is still so male dominated. Even filmmakers I like Mike Eggers and Ari Aster and stuff like that. It's still such a male. Jordan Peele. It's still so male driven. It drives me crazy.
It is.
Some of my favorite horror has been female directed, has been female written. And
How many horror movies directed by women do people say it's not that scary?
Yeah,
it's not really. It's not scary enough.
It's not scary enough.
Because women don't care as much about fucking like just being scary for the sake of being scary. Women want to make like stories, you know, like I know it's a generalization, but like.
No, but I also think it's just strictly about opportunity. Like it kind of feels like the stories that are getting chosen from female writers, from female directors, are more what you would call prestige horror, where they have to have like this like deeper level, like what else is going on? Is this an examination of her grief period? Is this an examination of her menstruation sadness? Like what is this? But it's gotta have something else going on. And I think part of the problem too is it's just they won't give a woman like a strict slasher movie. They won't say, hey, Kelly, come on down and direct Halloween 15. You know what I mean? That's part of the problem. I don't even think that like you're right. The stories they have picked, and I like them, but like they have picked stories that tend to be more, and especially when they're like women writer, women director, it's more narrative based and it's less just like stabby, stab, stab, but that doesn't mean they can't do it or don't want to do it.
Right.
What else you got on your list, D-Rock?
So I watched, like I said before, I watched a lot of movies I'd seen before, some of which are all-time favorites that I knew I just got to watch them every year at this time of year. Hellraiser. I mean, what more can we say about Hellraiser at this point? I just love it as it kind of epitomizes the brilliant horror film that most people would consider a B movie, because the effects and it was made in the 80s and it was independent, so it looks often very schlocky and it doesn't always take itself as seriously as possible, but it's such a great story. It's such a great film. Like it's so gory and like creative and beautiful. It's just it's so good. I also watched the second one, which is the most gloriously unhinged and ridiculous movie.
I know.
Oh my God. Just I love it. I love it.
I feel sad. What's funny, we were talking about the Hellraiser franchise, and I just feel sad for it that every movie that has come out has just made it worse and worse. Like they have beat that franchise into the ground
Like there's like 8 or 9 Hellraiser
Yeah,
movies.
and they're
No,
and
I know. I've seen them like on Tubi and shit, like the Bloodline or whatever the fuck it is. Like,
2, they're awful. After
Yeah.
2, they just become unwatchable. I would say 3,
Yeah.
and that's stretching it. I would say 3 is the last watchable Hellraiser movie.
yeah,
The rest of them, I tried putting them on, and they were one so boring. I turned them off. Like a Hellraiser movie should not be boring.
yeah.
We were
Ugh.
we actually got we were looking at the Hellraiser trailers for these secondary sequels, and we came across a YouTube video of some guy just telling us the plot of one of them,
The last one,
and it's
Yeah.
just they ripped off 7
Yeah.
and put
Oh my
the
god.
Cenobites in the movie. Like,
What?
why would you want to see a poor remake of 7? Hellraiser's in it.
They also just they don't understand. Like one of the things I like to talk about with Hellraiser is it is a strangely erotic film.
Yes. Oh, it's
And-
total.
and
It's a
it's
total
still-
BDSM fucking movie.
Oh,
Like,
totally. Like,
100%.
and I talk about how the Chatterer gave me weird feelings in my pants. That scene with Kirsty when he like sticks his fingers in her mouth, like
yeah.
that scene makes me think things. But anyway, enough about that. So it's meant to be erotic in a very like artsy kind of Geigery way, very strange. And I just feel like the later movies especially just don't understand that. They're just like titties, like that's it.
Right.
Like I don't even think in the first 2 Hellraiser movies you really even see like a lot of boobs, if any.
Oh, you see.
I think you see a little bit, but
No, in
it's not.
Really?
Hellraiser 1, you see boobs getting like glorified and all stuff.
It-
You see that mean girl bang Frank.
Yeah, but it's like barely there. I can barely remember it.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
saying-
but that's part of the story. It's not just tits.
yeah, it's not just.
Well, they had sex. They had an
We're
affair.
like apparently in the latest Hellraiser, they just had 3 naked women who were kneeling on the ground, waiting to get puked on by an old, yes, old priest who like chews up people's sins and then pukes it down a pipe. I'm like, who is this for? This erotic. I need to call their therapist. Like,
Yeah, things like,
like it's just they've completely lost the understanding of what kind of eroticism exists in that franchise and like what it means. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
they've just lost it. They've completely lost it.
So, a couple other all-time favorites that I got to take in, The Exorcist. I mean, another one. Like, what can we say about The Exorcist at this point? I did watch the Cursed Films episode about The Exorcist, and I will. It's kind of changed that movie in the same way that like the movies that made us about Home Alone changed did you see that the whole thing about how they did those stunts in Home, this is like a total digression, but in Home Alone they did all those stunts for real. They did all those falls were real. Like there were no pads, nothing. They did all that shit.
Wow.
Poor stuntmen did the most horrible. I was like, oh my god, that's horrible. The micro machines, they did that. Like, holy.
Why are you going on disability, John? Home Alone.
Yeah, right.
One and 2.
Well, in the Cursed Films episode about The Exorcist, they talk about like that scene where that super super creepy effective scene where Linda Blair's in the bed and she's like flailing back and forth. They had her like in like a bodice type like apparatus that was like doing that to her. She fractured a vertebrae.
Oh my goodness.
And they didn't even like she didn't even like go to the hospital. Like there's some fucked up, like there's a scene where the mom gets like thrown off the bed and like runs into the wall with her head. She got a concussion. Like I want to watch more of those cursed films episodes.
I love, like, that's what I kind of love about, like, 70s movies and even early, like, all the way up to, like, before CGI really took over. Because nowadays we're like, oh, those actors had to go to a cold location and pretend it was a hot location. What a tough job. And in these movies, they're like, throw that bitch in a wall. And break her neck. Like, come on.
No regard for labor laws, nothing. Just like, fuck these people. We're going to do whatever we want to them.
Just torture them. They're getting paid.
Well, even like, I remember reading about, there's like one of those lists of like 10 movies where things were more real than you realize. And I was reading about like Blair Witch Project. They like legit tortured those kids.
Oh no!
Yeah, no, you didn't know that the film crew was in the forest with them, like legit torturing them and like making all these noises to freak them the fuck out. Those reactions are 100% real. That movie's like kind of fucked up for that reason. They fucking abuse people. It's like ridiculous.
Torture those kids, man. Torture them kids.
Yeah.
That's good filmmaking.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Abuse is the best form of filmmaking.
They're getting paid.
Yeah. Well. Right. I also watched. Maybe I don't know if this is pretty close to one of my all-time, like, this is definitely my top 5, I would say. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is just like
The original.
Really? Oh man, you guys got to do that one.
Never seen it.
It's one of the most unique movies. I don't think, like, it's just the way it's made.
It's horrifying because the aesthetic of the movie makes it feel like it's real.
Exactly, yes.
It's so grungy, it feels like Leatherface edited this movie.
Right.
And shot
like
it.
It doesn't like hit the horror beats and stuff like that. Like Leatherface will just like jump out. Like it was like 20 minutes or 30 minutes into the movie, Leatherface just like jumps out. And it's like it feels more like a documentary at times because it doesn't follow the conventions of like what a film, like pacing of a film, and like it's just shit just happens. And like whoever did the location scouting for that movie, like the location that they found is amazing. The set design really fucking brings it home. Even the sound, like the sounds of like the car going over the gravel and like the really, really dry grass that like probably never has seen water in its life.
I probably never watched it. I don't know why I haven't watched it, but I guess one of the reasons maybe is because I watched the remake, which was the pretty good remake with
It is. It's one of the
Jessica
best.
Biel.
It is good, yeah.
I watched that by myself. That was like I'm in college. That was like I'm single now. I'm going to the movies by myself, and that's the film I picked because I hate myself. And so it's like, you know, me, and the theater was kind of empty. There was just like 2 other people in there. So I had a great time watching it. But I really liked the remake. So I guess I'll try
because the remake turns it into a regular horror movie, which is still a really good horror movie. But it makes it into like something that's more like what you think of a movie being.
Yeah, what do you think of
the original is not at all. Like it's just so weird, and like there's moments of like unintentional comedy that make it almost even more disturbing and real because like it doesn't like shy away from doing things that people might think are weird and kind of like laugh at them. And it just makes it even more like disturbing and like raw. It's just such a great movie.
I'm excited.
I can't believe this. My mind is blown.
That was one of
I've
3.
never seen that whole movie. No, not at all. I think I saw clips. That's it.
I want to rewatch the remake too. It's been a long time since I saw that, and I remember it being really good.
It was actually I mean, obviously I haven't seen the original, so I can't compare, but I think that it was just a very good horror movie in general.
Yeah.
It was very shocking and gross and brutal.
So we had a day that was a masked killer day, day 19.
Nice.
And we rewatched Urban Legends.
Yes.
Which is always great because it's got a an awesome
Female
female serial killer.
Nice.
We watched this movie that I do not recommend called Hellfest. That's from a year ago.
Yeah.
That was kind of bland. That's just another
Boring.
like haunted house gone wrong movie.
It sucks because I really just ended up just shipping the serial killer with the girl. But then, you know, they ruined it. And they're just like, no, she's got to run from him. He's a serial killer. But I thought it would have been kind of sexy if, like, she became... Anyway, moving on.
We also saw The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which is name-checked.
Oh, I like that name.
It's name-checked in Scream, so I felt like it was worthy of watching. And it's a 70s movie that is set in the 40s, and it's based on a real string of murders that happened
Halloween
in the Texarkana area, which the real murders were like rapes and murders, where like couples who were like making out get like murdered, and
they never caught
violated.
The person that did it.
They never caught the person that did it. So the movie kind of shows how the town reacted and kind of gives it sort of like a documentary feel with the way they're telling the story, which was interesting for a slasher movie. But since you never learn who the killer is and you know this is based on a real story, like it just becomes messed up. The most noteworthy thing about the movie is that they have a kill that the killer does where he takes a trombone
and ties a knife
onto it and then plays the trombone through his mask, stab a girl with it.
So I was reading about this movie, and it predates Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween. Some people argue that this is the first American slasher film, because even though it's filmed in the style of a docudrama, the kills are very slashery. You know, very like he stalks the night and he comes in to get you and all this kind of stuff like that. So some people argue that it's the first kind of American slasher. Obviously, most people agree that or think it's Halloween is like the first official, like, yes, this is a new genre of horror where a guy is running around killing a bunch of teens for no reason. But it was interesting to watch it from that perspective. But the only thing, like, I will say, I'm like, I got annoyed because now that I understand the Scream reference, I'm like, those kids would never know what the fuck this movie was. Like Sidney Prescott would not know what the fuck Town That Dreaded Sundown, unless I guess her friend, the video store guy, forced her. Jamie Kennedy might have forced her to watch it, but like, seriously, I'm like, no 90s teen would be like, it's like the Town That Dreaded Sundown on here. Like, that is you, Wes Craven, being an ass.
And then the movie that makes me think of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that definitely had to have been influenced by it, was we saw 1979's Tourist Trap, which has a bunch of like kids driving around and they have car problems and they come across like a lake, and there's like a weird creepy old dude who's like watching these girls skinny dip in his lake, and then he's like, don't go into my house, and they go into his house, and his house is filled with mannequins that he has posed all around his house, and then there's a masked person who's killing people, but
turning them into mannequins.
But they have mental powers.
Yeah.
So they can like move these mannequins with their minds. So this is both like a slasher. It's like if Carrie was a slasher who was insane. And I applaud the movie for its creativity.
It did a lot. That movie did a lot.
That feels like too many advantages for a killer to have.
It was a lot. It really was.
So that was really fun. Yeah. And it had the sort of comedic sensibilities of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. That's cool.
So I'd recommend that to the kids out there.
The mask was creepy.
Yes. Tourist Trap.
Yeah. Cool. Did you say it influenced Stephen King, or Stephen King said it was his favorite horror movie?
Yes, it's one of Stephen King's favorite horror movies.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
Which I can tell the Stephen King like humor, like he'd appreciate all the humor in it and stuff. We also had a day where we had to just watch first-time watch movies. So we watched two movies on Hulu. One of them was called Uncanny Annie. That's sort of like a horror Jumanji type movie.
Nice.
Which was it started
I'm
off
gonna tell you
strong and then it went downhill so fast.
I'm gonna tell you that every one of the first time watches were pretty, except the Mortuary Collection was pretty cool, but yeah, like
this is part of Hulu's Inside the Dark collection.
Yeah.
So we watched Uncanny Annie and then this movie they have called Crawlers. That's basically a sort of body snatchers zombie movie.
That was boring.
Set during St. Patrick's Day.
I feel bad, but it was boring.
It was not boring.
It was kind of boring.
It was entertaining.
I barely remember that.
What I thought was really interesting about it was they put in this sort of like the plot of the movie is it's set at St. Patrick's Day, and there's a bunch of like there's a fraternity that is like notorious for being horrible,
sexual predators
to women.
Yeah.
And then one of the people that got body snatched was one of these sexual predator dudes, or who they thought the dude was a sexual predator. And then as the story goes on, like they kind of like find this dude and he sort of has like he has a moment.
He's not like the other guys in his frat. Like he has layers, I guess, to him.
And they sort of like they just make a very interesting argument to him that like, well, how do we know you're a nice guy when you're hanging around with like all these assholes and you're living with them and like you do what they say? Like, how does that really make you a good guy?
I think that like the human drama of the story was more engrossing for me than the actual monster plot. So like I like this. There's a storyline about a friendship that's basically on the rocks, and then a girl who's kind of a loner who doesn't want friends, sort of developing friendships over the course of the action of the movie. That part was cool and like interesting, but I don't know. I just the aliens themselves, I was very bored with them.
Because they're just doubles.
But
doesn't matter.
but they didn't even have like but they didn't have like an interesting like lair. It was just some sort of like rip off like Roswell looking set, and I was just like I was not impressed with it. That was my problem. So I guess I tuned out to the parts of the movie like by the climax where it's supposed to be, you know, like the scary stuff's going on and the monsters are coming for them. I'm like, what monsters are boring? So I was just like, yeah.
So don't see Crawlers. Don't see Uncanny Annie. However, do watch on Shudder. It's a Shudder exclusive. It's called The Mortuary Collection. And it's a horror anthology about with somebody who's talking to Clancy Brown, who plays like an older mortician. And that's really all I'm going to say. But they're very well executed.
Very
anthology shorts.
Very Creepshow, very Tales from the Hood kind of thing.
So I recommend that.
Yeah.
Nice.
What else you got on your list, D-Rock?
Let's see. There's a couple of old avant-garde movies that I wasn't really that into, but I can kind of appreciate, I guess. Both from 1977, interestingly enough. For Giallo Day, I'd never watched a Giallo movie before in my life. So I watched Suspiria.
Oh, yeah. The original, right? The Dario Argento?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the original, yeah. Which was really fucking weird.
Oh, yeah.
Until I kind of, like, was clued into the fact that, like, most of this is supposed to be, like, symbolic. And then I was kind of like, okay, I can kind of get behind the creativity. I might watch it again and kind of, like, watch it with different eyes, not, like, knowing that, you know, it's something that I wasn't necessarily expecting going into it.
I think with an Argento movie, you have to realize like the visuals like 80% of it, like the story,
right, yeah.
like 20% maybe.
Yeah,
but
that's the thing. I was like kind of like, why are all these rooms so red? Why is everything red and blue and green? What the fuck is going on here?
I think that you should watch the remake, which
I've heard it's good.
If you can believe, longer than the original. And it's slower than the original.
Oh my god.
However, I think the payoff is just spectacular. I liked the original Suspiria, and I watched the remake because I wasn't expecting to like it, and I was very into it. It's definitely a journey, and it's an odd journey, but I'm happy with that they managed to keep the oddness of that story intact and make it pretty horrible because it's kind of gross. It's gross.
Yeah. Yeah, so I watched that, and then I also watched Eraserhead.
Oh, Eraserhead.
That movie
Well, I've never seen Eraserhead.
is so
It's
so fucking weird. Like it's another one that I appreciate the creativity, but this like level of intentional weirdness and just like pure symbolism just like doesn't really do much for me.
Like, is why I didn't like David Lynch for a very long time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, with John Carpenter. It took me time to appreciate John Carpenter because I think I watched the wrong one of their movies for the first time exposure. So I was like, what the fuck is wrong with these guys? But like, like Eraserhead is just, it's like a nightmare that he had one day, and he's like, I'm going to put this in a film, and it's like, all right.
He said it's also about like his fear of being a father.
Oh, so, I get that, David.
Right, yeah, like exactly.
David,
it's so like he kind of got his thesis and then was like, how can I bring this thesis to life in a way that's like maybe understandable if you really look at it, but anybody that doesn't think for more than like 3 hours about this movie is never gonna figure out what the fuck is going on.
And part of that movie actually really is disturbing. It's that baby.
Yeah.
It creeps me out.
It looks like the Yee dinosaur.
Oh, it's too creepy. And the girl in the radiator and I don't need all of that. But yeah, Eraserhead.
Yeah, that was a weird experience for sure. For Gothic Day, I did Interview with the Vampire, which enjoyable. Not super my thing. I like Dracula a lot better than this. I guess that's kind of probably an obvious statement, but yeah, it's very like 90s in ways that are kind of like the ways that Dracula is 90s in a very fun way. This kind of just felt like, it just felt like it was something that they did after Dracula to kind of.
No, don't be. Well, listen, the 90s was like the height of the Anne Rice obsession.
Yeah, for sure.
So, like, her idea of vampires influenced so much in that time period. So, I think you have to look at it kind of like that. It's just they say that she basically kind of revamped, pun intended, or or kind of created the modern day like emo, broody. I am so sad I drink blood, but I wish I didn't. I wish I had a girlfriend instead of.
There's so much scene chewing in that fucking movie.
Yeah, but I like it. I think it's Tom Cruise's best role. I'm sorry.
It's fun. It's enjoyable.
Him playing a piano as like a desiccated corpse is my favorite. Like, come on, man! Like he drank, telling the story of like I sucked the blood of alligators. I'm like, oh, this is the best thing. I love it. I do.
Yeah. And then
pause. Gonna have to cut this out. Stuff went down the wrong pipe.
Oh no. So for my, I had a body horror day. That was the day that I did Eraserhead, but I also watched two other movies that I was very, very impressed with. The first, I'll talk about Raw first because I have a lot to say about the other one, but I don't know if you guys have seen Raw.
I've been afraid of that movie.
No,
It's fucking disturbing as hell,
Yeah.
but it's excellent. And like my first question about this movie is what the fuck kind of veterinary school did this girl go to? That they're like, it's so crazy. I don't know if this is like how French people are or what, but like she gets there and already they're already doing like extremely disturbing hazing to the new kids. It's like super weird, and then like it just degenerates from there. And but like it's, I mean, the lead, Garance Marillier, I don't know if that's pronounced correct. She is incredible in this movie. And the ending is so good. Such a good ending. I would definitely highly recommend Raw. And then the other movie I saw for Body Horror Day that is one of the best movies I've seen so far this October, The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Oh yeah, I like that movie.
That's a great. I mean,
It's scary as fuck.
It's super scary. Do not watch this movie while you are eating food.
Yeah.
Because it centers around a very graphic autopsy. Like, not just graphic in terms of they show a lot of stuff, but there's some fucked up shit inside this woman's body.
I really like that movie a lot. I want to rewatch it.
I liked it, but I've literally like forgotten everything about it.
It's so incredibly effective. There was a couple of moments in the movie that felt a little bit emotionally manipulative. I thought like there's a kitty violence scene, just to warn people who don't like kitty violence, that felt a little bit predatory on the audience's emotions.
Cat violence, right? You mean you mean cat violence, right?
Cat, yeah.
Okay, yeah, no. Yes, please do tell people. I actually, to this day now, I totally use doesthedogdie.com for anyone.
Oh, really?
That actually will tell you, it will tell you in advance. Sometimes it might spoil the movie. They do give you warnings about what things might spoil the movie or not.
Right.
But they are very, it's a collective based, like, user inserts in added thing where they tell you all the kind of trigger warnings. So they have stuff like, does it involve nails, needles? Does it involve cat die?
That's cool.
Animal die? So it's cool because it's good for people to kind of get a warning. You can kind of watch the movie and know when, brace yourself for it, or just decide not to watch it at all. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, so the ending of this movie is really what put it over the top for me, and I'm definitely not going to spoil anything about this ending. But this corpse that they're doing an autopsy of basically has some very fascinating hidden secrets, and the ending / explanation of what's been happening basically is amazing. And there's one thing I want to talk about, but it's sort of spoilery, and so I guess I'll just give a warning. And whoever has seen the movie already can kind of listen to this, or whatever. It's a 4-year-old movie, so whatever. But I was reading the plot synopsis on Wikipedia, and it says at the end that the curse is lifted, and I didn't get that at all. I didn't see the curse being lifted at all in that final sequence, especially with like the last frame of the movie. Like, no way. This is not the end of this curse. Like, this is gonna keep happening. So
I didn't get that the curse was lifted from that.
Yeah, I don't know how whoever did that Wikipedia page. I don't know how they got it.
Doesn't it have like a stinger kind of ending where it's just like that one last?
Yeah. The little bell. Yeah. So yeah, but that was probably that's like probably in the top 3 movies that I've watched so far this month. Really, really well done. I also watched, for what day was that? Sci-Fi, I think. I watched Overlord, which was super
Yay!
fun. Oh my god.
I love Overlord. I've watched it like 3 times.
It's really interesting because today I watched all 4 Purge movies, and I'm not going to talk about at length because I'm going to save it for next week because I already have way too many things to talk about. But it was interesting to contrast those movies with this movie that is like it's just enough schlock and like just enough social commentary. Like it's kind of like it can be tricky to do Nazi horror right
Yeah.
and not be like too exploitative, but like, you know, still have fun with it. This movie like struck that balance so perfectly, I
Very
thought.
well. Yeah, like this.
And the action is amazing. The comedy is amazing. I mean, it's just really it's all
I
around.
really loved the set that they chose.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because it struck a balance of sort of being sensitive about the subject while also being like, no, but they're evil Nazis and they're bad and they do terrible things to people.
Right.
But it wasn't just like in the middle of a death camp where it's kind of like, whoa, we know this happened. Like we don't need to.
And it's got that very classic like Nazi evil sci-fi-ness to it where they're like doing creepy experiments on people and tubes going into people and stuff like that, which is a very
I really love
standby kind of thing. I feel like
the intro is so great because it totally just throws you in the film. Anyway, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one complaint I have about this movie, and maybe it might just be me, it might just be that I've seen so much Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that it just colored my hearing, but Ian DeCastiger's American accent is not good. I could definitely tell. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Like maybe I just know.
The tough.
The first one that turns.
Oh, okay.
And it's like, no, dude, you're so obviously Scottish. Like, stop it. But yeah, that was a great movie. What was it? Yesterday or the day before, maybe, was my Splatter Day. And for Splatter Day, I finally was able to experience the fucking masterpiece of nonsense that is Blood Diner. What the fuck did I just watch?
You don't understand. Blood Diner made such an impression on me that I'm going to be Sheetar for Halloween. Like, yes. I need to get a shiny wig and some pointy teeth, and I'm gonna make my eyebrows disappear with a glue stick. I'm gonna be Sheetar. I'm excited about it.
There's just so like I have a list of moments that I loved about this movie, and I'm just gonna go down the list. There's that one part where the fucking brain of the disembodied brain of their Uncle Anwar is like talking about the fucking like body that they're constructing for Sheetar, and he's like, "Oh, such great knockers! If only I had my schlong back, you would know the true meaning of machismo."
Like everything about that movie is just.
There's the when they're at the club and they like push that guy in the street and the fucking car just smashes his head and everyone just laughs, and then his friend is like, "Hey Jason, are you okay?" I'm like, what? The way people react to things in this movie is like no person would ever react this way to things like this in life. The clay person? What the fuck was the clay person?
Man, yeah.
No. The best part is when you first meet Hitler Jr., professional wrestler.
Yes. No, I love when he like takes a bite out of his leg and then the lady like is wanting to leave, so the guy just punches her in the face, and there's a dude walking by and he's like, "Oh, she just can't stand the sight of blood." But you just watched him punch his girlfriend in the face. What the fuck? How is that an excuse?
Oh man. It's the thing is too, just you can tell how Hollywood this movie is, and what I mean by that is everybody walking around Hollywood desperate for work.
Yeah, right. Oh my God.
Put
Yeah.
him in this
Totally.
movie. And like the wrestling rink is like you could tell it's in like some back alley wrestling
Right.
place. Like the rink is falling apart. Like you know,
Yeah.
like didn't they have like at one point for the rink? Wasn't it just like they had bungee cord or something?
No, you could see how tattered like the ring mat was.
Yeah.
You're
And you
right.
could
Yeah.
see like the ropes were like frayed. Like
I thought they
Yeah.
I thought they had like a funny fix, like a kind of like
I don't remember that.
I don't know. Sorry, maybe I'm misremembering.
I love the part where they like stick the woman's head in the deep fryer,
Yeah.
and then instead of coming out like grossly burned or whatever, she comes out with her head is just like a big ball of falafel. Like
Puppy, it's like,
Like somehow he battered her while he was in there. He got enough batter on her.
oh man, that movie's so
No, and then
funny.
the weird rival diner owner
Yeah.
who
oh, that's
talks
right.
to a
Who
dummy,
steals the brain.
and he just talks to a dummy the whole movie.
Oh my God. Yeah. The fucking yeah. Oh my God.
No, the best
You know what it
part
reminded me of? It reminded me of on Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Mikey's grandma, who's like made out of foam rubber.
it's also just like it's so funny when he's like, give me your recipe for your great diner food. I'm like, they're eating people, bro. Like
Yeah, right. He gives them the ingredients. He's like, okay, blood of virgins. Okay, it's just like very natural. Like, oh, okay, yeah, these are the ingredients.
I want to be rich.
Yep.
Everyone should watch Blood Diner on Hulu.
Yes. Oh my goodness, just a beautiful masterpiece of just nonsense. Like I can't use a better word than that. It's just like nothing makes sense at all, and it's amazing.
It cannot cure the coronavirus, but it can cure quarantine.
Yes.
Oh, did you see? I posted a screenshot when I first started watching it. The first lines that their Uncle Anwar says in the movie, the subtitles in like brackets before his line, it says Egyptian accent. I was like, Hulu, what the fuck is this racist shit you're telling people that it's an
But
Egyptian?
it's supposed to be an Egyptian.
He's supposed to be
accent.
Egyptian. Okay, yeah, okay.
Like so.
I can, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's
I'll
why he's named Anwar, and
right.
Sheetar is. But that's in and of itself, it's messed.
Right. Yeah. So from one extreme to another, the most impressed that I was this week by a movie, I saw that thing that came out recently of like science has proved what the most scary movie of all time is, and apparently it's Sinister.
Yeah.
So I decided to watch Sinister, and I was really, really impressed by this movie.
It's scary.
What I was impressed with was this, like, I don't know, maybe I'm like looking too hard for stuff or whatever, but like every level of production of this movie, I felt like did an amazing job. Like the color was amazing, the photography, the cinematography, the production design team all did an amazing job. The lighting is amazing. The way they use darkness in this movie and still have like the ability to, the richness of the color in the movie is also so, the way that they use color and the score and the sound design and just like everything about this movie I thought was like really, really, because the content isn't anything like super, I mean, it's a good story, but it's not anything super groundbreaking. But the reason it's so scary is because it's so well executed.
Yeah.
That it's just like, it's so vivid and vividly brought to life that makes it scary.
And it also has the sort of built-in story thing where you feel like you could take the horror home with you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you could put on a tape and it'll be something fucked up.
Well,
And it'll
I
be
do
this
think-
fault.
I do think, even though the idea of like a demon haunting people isn't a new concept, I do think the execution of how that happens
Oh yeah.
was really creative and terrifying. Like the home movies thing,
Yeah.
that concept like was so disturbing. The
Yeah.
way, and especially the way that it like started off and you're like, oh, it's a normal it's a normal home video, and then it just twists itself into this
Right.
nightmarish version of that. I really like loved that concept, and I think that was unique because I haven't
Yeah.
seen that in other stories.
This is also, it's a great example of a movie that hits a couple of pretty predictable notes, but in a good way. Like, it does things that are predictable because they're what's supposed to happen.
It
Like when he,
burns. Yeah.
when he burns all the movies, I was like, well, obviously they're going to appear in his house now. But when they did, I wasn't disappointed. Like, oh, that's so predictable. No, that's good storytelling. That's why I knew that was going to happen, because that's what should happen.
That's
when
why I'm honestly sad they made a Sinister 2, which I did try to watch.
Oh, yeah.
It is very disappointing, so don't watch it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's not worth it. I'm disappointed that they tried to make another one of these. I know it lends itself to sequelization, but I don't think that it should have been.
The more you build this world, the less scary it is.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
that's one of those things you need to leave alone, I think.
Exactly, because the only thing you can do in these movies now, and that's what they did, is to keep explaining more about who the Bagul is and all that stuff. And it's not.
Is that what it's called? The Bagul?
Yeah, the name of the
Yeah.
demon is Bagul. And so it's just like, it's not fun. It really wasn't as fun, and it wasn't as scary. It wasn't scary at all, really. It was just disturbing, and like, it's just, yeah, like, I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot of discussion. I saw, I was looking for any talk of a sequel for Autopsy of Jane Doe also, because I kind of would love to see like what the end game for this person is. Trying to be as vague as possible for the spoilers. But there was a lot of discussion about, like, you know, maybe it would be better to leave this universe as it is, and maybe that makes it a little bit more scary. And I kind of see the point there, even though I would love to see more Autopsy of Jane Doe movies. But there's something to be said for that, like the mystery of a universe, making it more interesting and more haunting and more, you know, scarier.
It's tough because, like, I think that sometimes, like, horror sequels can be really good and add to the thing. And then sometimes
sometimes they can mess up the original. It's a fine balance.
It is.
It is. Like, a perfect example, a couple of weeks ago, and I watched Creep, and I was like, oh my God, this movie is amazing. I watched the second one and was like, holy shit, this is like 10 times better somehow. And I thought the first one was great, and then it's still like the second one was so much better for me. I was just like, yeah. And there's a lot of people that say like, oh, they like, hopefully they won't make more of that movie. I think that's one that I also agree with, that like, I don't think there's much more you can add that wouldn't take away from the universe.
I think Sinister is a good movie to close on.
Yes.
I have been your host, Steven.
And I have been me, Dani, the angry dog.
And D-Rock, the world NB champion.
You can tweet us at Vundacast. Shoot us an email, vundacast@gmail.com. And remember, kids, if you want to be cool, you got to stay in school like the Bagul.
Hail Vunder.
Hail Vunder.
Vundacast? Give it up for Vundacast, man. What an adorable name.
You're listening to the Vundacast.
What's up, everybody? This is Jason David Frank, Green Ranger. You're listening to Vundacast.
Subscribe to the Vundacast.